Hello, the name of this presentation and this work is Chimpanzee Behavior and Clausewitzian War, Differences and Similarities in the Realms of Politics of Conflict. This is a work in progress that Danielle and I are working, and we'll present to you our findings so far. Here's just a summary of how this presentation goes. So we'll start talking about the Clausewitzian War and his theory. Then we'll discuss the chimpanzees in-group and out-group dynamics. And after this, we will synthesize both groups of articles and texts and discussions, what they lead us to, and the tensions that come up. And finally, we will conclude talking about how far we got and what we're going to do next. To start, we talk about war in Clausewitzian, from the Clausewitzian theory. War in general is described from the articles we read as an inter-society lethal violence. So it's a type of violence that it's very lethal, so it has many deaths, and it happens between societies. So it's one society fighting another society, but both of them from the same species. And it's lethal because it has many deaths as an outcome. But Clausewitz was one of the first authors to really describe it and gives a definition to war. So he understands war as the continuation of politics by other means. So for him, war is an instrument of politics. It's a way to resolve a confrontation or a problem still in the political realm. So for them, it's something that happens that it's still a continuation of politics. And we understand that it's helpful to understand who Clausewitz was as an author to understand his theory. He was a Prussian general who fought in the Napoleonic Wars in the 19th century. This is important to know because from his experience in the war, he writes and talks about what war is. So he brings the viewpoint that he had from the armies, from the general. He sees a lot the Napoleonic figure as an example of a general. So everything he lived and saw, he brings to this war theory. So what's war? What is the war characteristics for him? So for him, war is a large and legal duel between two states. So we see two states fighting just like a duel, but if duel is one person against another person, in war they bring the duel to a higher level, that it's one state, one army of a state fighting another one. And given this scenario, he highlights three actors that engage in war that are very important, and specifies the role for each one of them. It's called the Clausewitz Trinity. So one actor is the military. So the militaries are responsible for the execution of the conflict. They are the ones who are in the field fighting for the state. The government is responsible for the strategy, the political game, the understanding of the forces, of the movements, and the decision. The government as a whole, but the president or the emperor, they are both part of the government. And the last actor is the people. So the population of that state, they are responsible for the motivations, the feelings, the engagement of the war to the militaries. And another characteristic of the war for Clausewitz is who they are fighting with. So the enemy, the ones they are fighting, would only be legitimate for Clausewitz if it was another state. So a state fighting another one. And if the enemy was not a state, if it was, for example, mercenaries or colonized peoples, they would not be considered as a worthy, actually as an enemy at all, actually as an opponent. So they are called barbarians, people who do not practice real war. So they cannot and do not practice real war because they are not a state. Moving on to the part that we look at the chimpanzee community, because so far we have looked to the human practice of war. But when we read texts that contemplate the chimpanzee, and from a big history perspective, that chimpanzees engage in war as well, we see two dynamics that are very important, that are the in-group and the out-group. So these articles, these authors that observate chimpanzee communities, they have shown their refined in-war sociability and their non-existent sociability in the war context. These are two different moments in the chimpanzee community. So I'll talk about them both. One is that their in-war sociability. We see that the chimpanzee community is a very political one. So they socialize very much, and they use this to move in the hierarchy. It's a very hierarchy group, but it's very fluid. So one member can move in the hierarchy if they want so. And this movement in the hierarchy level is made through politics. So, for example, grooming. So they use this refined sociability to rise in the hierarchy in not violent manners, or a manner that does not involve bloodshed. So, for example, one member wishes to defy another one who is higher in the hierarchy, so they can make a coalition with other members and then rise in the hierarchy, enhancing their dominance level, or even becoming an alpha male, which is the higher level of hierarchy in the chimpanzee community. Because being dominant has also a lot of benefits. So they have more access to than other members to resources. They live much more years, and that's the benefits. Of course, there are also costs from being dominant, which, for example, is the higher level of stress. So this is something that occurs in the chimpanzee community without necessarily having deaths. And it shows how sociable they are, how political they are. But when it comes to external conflict, when it comes to them fighting other group, we see a shift. So we don't see politics anymore. We don't see conciliation. We don't see these political movements that happened before. So how their warfare works in the chimpanzee case, and what's its consequences. The war in chimpanzee communities is all based in the imbalance of power hypothesis. It says that when a group of chimpanzee see that they encounter a group that has lesser members than them, they are bigger as a group than the other one, it already shows the imbalance of power and the asymmetric of war. So this imbalance of power gives resembles a chance that the conflict may happen, and the outcome is positive for the bigger group. And in the chimpanzee case, this war is marked from the willing to annihilate the other group. So we see that the chimpanzee the chimpanzee community that is fighting another group do not see them as an equal. So it happens a process, a mental process, and unconscious too, to stop seeing the other chimpanzee as an equal as a chimpanzee. And that also makes easier for this logic of annihilation, because they can annihilate if the other is not your similar. I also want to talk about two social activities that happen in the chimpanzee community that has relations to the warfare. One is the border patrol. It's a very normal practice in the chimpanzee community. It's not all the group that engaged in the patrol, and it's basically the patrol of the border of the chimpanzee community that may or may not encounter another community of chimpanzees. But who participates in the patrol are usually more sociable members, the ones who show up the most, the ones who are higher in the dominance, and also the patrol has its benefits such as the spoils of that, or etc. Another activity that chimpanzees engage are the raids that are actually the real confrontation, the external conflicts of two groups of chimpanzees. So, as I said, it shows how political activity, both of them are political activities chimpanzees have, and it's just one of them. So it's like warfare is one of other political activities they have. So we see that as a resuming that the conflict is both a scenario of stress and opportunity. From the articles we read, we see that even from the threat of an out group, the threat of another group of chimpanzees, it brings a lot of stress, accumulative stress, in the community of chimpanzees. And the conflict as well brings higher levels of stress. But it's also a scenario of opportunity, since before the conflict, after the conflict, they can enhance their access to resources. So when we look at these two groups of literature and then contrast with one with other, we see parallels and differences. So when we look at the war in the 19th century between states that Clausewitz talks about, and the one that chimpanzees engage, we see some similarities. For example, the struggle for resources and territories as being a concern from the two groups. So we see that the access to resources, the access to territories, is an outcome of the conflict in both cases. Another one is that the conflict as an activation by a political elite. So as we saw, the conflict in the chimpanzee community is driven by those who are dominant, those who have an influence on the group. And this is seen in the human level as well, in the cases of oligarchies, of great nations, for example. And when we look at the consequences of the conflict as well, they are similar, because we see an unequal cost throughout the group. So even those who do not participate in the conflict are not spared, like in the case of mothers and infants who are deaf or engage or suffer the consequences in some level. And it's very unequal, this cost throughout the group. But there are also differences. So in the interstate case, in the interstate war, we see from Clausewitz's theory that these two states, they in the conflict, they are guided by the belief that them both share the same guidebook. So they are fighting against each other, but they know that there is a limit, a legal limit that it's common to them both. So they know who should they kill, who should not they kill, how they should kill people. They both understand that and try to act according to this guidebook, according to this legal ground. But this is not seen in the chimpanzee case, because like we see, when they are fighting someone they understand as an outgroup, as a non-chimpanzee, there are no good ways or bad ways to acceptable ways to kill an outgroup. Every way is acceptable. Another difference is that the war, the human war, the interstate war, is not with the goal exactly to annihilate the other one, but to subordinate them to your will. And it's something that we see in the chimpanzee case, in the in-group sociability that I talked about, when they are defying the social order to rise. It's not to annihilate the other member, but to subordinate them for your will. And these discussions have led us to the hypothesis of this work, is that while chimpanzees operate in this outgroup, in-group line, humans, according to Clausewitz's word theory, seem to have been able to create a third group that mixes elements of these two evolutionary categories. So the in-group and out-group have been with us mentally through all this time since the chimpanzees. But in the human case, we have seen to create this third one in the middle of these two. Just to conclude and illustrate our findings and what this work have led us so far, we understand that Clausewitz's thesis that war is politics by other means does not exactly apply when we look at the chimpanzee society. So we see politics very much in the in-group sociability and in their lives. But when it comes to a conflict, it seems that this politics, there's this refined politics kind of stops. So it's not a concept we can apply to the chimpanzee case. And in his theory, Clausewitz blends these two dynamics, the in-group sociability and the out-group destruction, to create a third group. And on the right, we illustrate that in the Clausewitz scenario that he's talking about. So the in-group in this case would be the Prussians, the one that he is referring to. So they are the us. They are talking about. He's talking about. And there is an out-group who we should destruct, who is not like us, does not look like us, does not engage in war like us. That are, in his case, the barbarians and the colonized people, for example. But between those two, it seems to emerge a new element that is figured by other Germans, other Europeans, that the Prussians, for example, fought. So they are like us, but they are not exactly like us, but we are fighting them anyway. So this is a territory we very look forward to explore. Those are the references of our work that help us to build this presentation. Thank you.